that. Mayam Bhante Tisaranena Saha Pancha Silani Yachama Dutiyampi Mayam Bhante Tisaranena Saha Pancha Silani Yachama Tatiyampi Mayam Bhante Tisaranena Saha Pancha Silani Yachama.
On that next page, 128, recite the Namo. I'll recite it 3 times in Pali, and you all can recite it 3 times afterwards. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa.
In Pali, we'll just go one for one. Buddhang saranang gacchami.
Buddhang saranang gacchami.
Dhammang saranang gacchami.
Dhammang saranang gacchami.
Sanghang saranang gacchami.
Sanghang saranang gacchami.
Dutiyampi buddhang saranang gacchami.
Dutiyampi buddhang saranang gacchami.
Dutiyampi dhammang saranang gacchami.
Dutiyampi dhammang saranang gacchami.
Dutiyampi sanghang saranang gacchami.
Dutiyampi sanghang saranang gacchami.
Tatiyampi buddhang saranang gacchami.
Tatiyampi buddhang saranang gacchami.
Tatiyampi dhammang saranang gacchami.
Tatiyampi dhammang saranang gacchami.
Tatiyampi sanghang saranang gacchami.
Tatiyampi sanghang saranang gacchami.
Tisarana kamanang nititang.
Bhante.
Repeat that. Precepts, 1 in Pali, and we'll do English as well. Angatipata veramani sikkhapadam samadhiyami.
Anatipata veramani sikkhapadam samadhiyami.
I undertake the precept to refrain from taking the life of any living creature.
I undertake the precept to refrain from taking the life of any living creature.
Adinadana veramani sikkhapadam samadhiyami.
Adinadana veramani sikkhapadam samadhiyami.
I undertake the precept to refrain from taking that which is not given.
I undertake the precept to refrain from taking that which is not given.
Kamesumicchachara veramani sikkhapadam samadhiyami.
Kamesu nichachara veramani sikkhapadam samadhiyami.
I undertake the precept to refrain from sexual misconduct.
I undertake the precept to refrain from sexual misconduct.
Musavada veramani sikkhapadam samadhiyami.
Musavada veramani sikkhapadam samadhiyami.
I undertake the precept to refrain from lying.
I undertake the precept to refrain from lying.
Surameraya Majapamada Tana Veramani Sikkhapadang Samadhiyami.
Surameraya Prajapamadhatana Veramani Sikkhapadang Samadhiyami.
I undertake the precept to refrain from taking intoxicants which lead to carelessness.
I undertake the precept to refrain from taking intoxicants which lead to carelessness.
Imani pancha sikkhapadani silena sukatiñyanti silena bhoga sampara silena nibbutiñyanti tasma silang visodaye. Virtue, these are the 5 precepts. Virtue is the source of happiness. Virtue is the source of true wealth. Virtue is the source of peacefulness. Therefore, let virtue be purified.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Bow. Bow. Bow.
It's really beautiful to come into a space where people are undertaking those, and the transformative power those precepts have, I feel like people can underestimate, but hearing the kind of alchemy it affects on lives when people hold them and take, for example, the 4th into a work environment, which is not easy to hold honesty in the profession truly and purely. We've just seen it have such a protective power, and so beginning a Sunday is seeing such a group of people commit to those together is really heartening. And it's also a nice way for us to kind of meet this community again. Some of you were here last night, but just to say, Ajahn Kovilo and I came to the Northwest, returned to the Northwest about 3.5 years ago. And since then, seeing this interweaving of communities between Portland and Seattle, touching in here and there, seeing people from Portland come up to meet us at Saturday gatherings or at alms or at retreats, or seeing you all at robe offerings down here with the Pacific Hermitage monks. It's been heartening and really nice to see that kind of connection begin to form, but we were very glad to receive the invitation from the Portland Friends of Dhamma to actually come and really directly connect with you all. It's been some time that we've really hoped for that, and just grateful for this space. The first place I was mentioning yesterday that Ajahn Kovilo and I kind of decided to, contemplate going to Seattle together was when we were at the Pacific Hermitage, and just what this community has cultivated, the space you've held, the fact that Jessica has, helped cultivate this ground as well. We're just very grateful to finally be here. So thank you, everyone. And just to say that we hope to see many of you in Seattle in coming months and years. And just reach out if you're coming up there on a Saturday, and we have hospitality stewards who can hopefully find you a place to stay. So, Ajahn.
Okay. So being here together on Sunday Sila, we can start with some meditation. And the type of meditation that I'll be introducing today is something I like to call the sprout body meditation. It can bring some aliveness both to body and mind, which is really essential that our practices, our precepts, our meditation feels alive, flexible, fresh. So with this meditation, we can imagine that basically from the waist down is embedded in the ground. So from the waist down, we're just embedded in the oil, in the soil, embedded in the earth. You can imagine the spinal column just lengthening downwards, this root feeling very rooted, very grounded as we sit here, whether on a chair or sitting on the ground. With this root extending downwards. From the waist up is our sprout body. And you can just imagine the whole body from the waist up is this growing little sprout. We've got these two little spriglet arms on the left and right with little leafy hands just sitting in our lap, resting on the earth. And you can imagine it's midday and the sun is just very gently, very organically just pulling the sprout upwards. Sprout is extending upwards. And you can even shake out the shoulders a little bit, shake the body just to get this feel of flexibility. And this is really important. Meditation posture isn't a frozen thing. It's not a rigid form which we just lock into and fasten onto and have to hold so tight to, but it's it can be a dynamic dance of uprightness, alertness. And this is the type of mind which we want to be cultivating as well. A mind which is fresh. We're not just clamping down into a technique, but we're a living organism, just breathing in the world. And so with our sprout body, just extending this feeling of freshness and aliveness, you can bring attention to respiration, this exchange with the world, and becoming aware of the full in-breath and the full out-breath. Totally natural process. And just as a sprout is breathing through the whole of its sprout body and its leaves, so too you can imagine this whole sprout body, this whole body expanding as we take in air, as we take in light, and contracting as we exhale. And this is the practice for this period of time. Maintaining an aliveness, this green, fresh awareness. Knowing the full in-breath and the full out-breath. Just like that. And remaining and training in awareness. If you're feeling any stiffening, settling in the body, or any rigidity of mind, you can even just physically shake it up with the body. Or just bring a whiff of freshness to the mind. If the thoughts are pulling in the direction of the future, if you find yourself even leaning towards thoughts of wanting this or wanting that, just remember the sun. Just allow the body and the mind to just come back to this place of balance. And similar with thoughts of aversion or disliking, thinking about the past, a retraction of mind. Allowing this freshness, this organic, upward and alert posture of body and mind. Realizing the breath never left. Just knowing the full in-breath and the very next full out-breath. And training in being right here with lightness, aliveness. In the last couple of minutes of a group meditation, sharing this space with all the other sprouts in the room, it can be really useful and really beautiful to practice loving kindness, metta meditation. We've already been training in this greenness of mind, exchanging with the world, receiving in the in-breath and giving in the out-breath, and keeping up this momentum and this awareness of expansion and contraction. And shifting into metta, you can just add a few words, sentiments, intentions. So with every in-breath, you can think, May I be well. May I be well. And with the very next out-breath, just may all beings be well. Just giving and receiving. May I be well. And may all beings be well. This omnidirectional, swaying, this exchange, not making too much of a difference between well-wishing for oneself and well-wishing for the world. And there needn't be any limit, either internally or externally. Breathing in, may I be well, completely. Breathing out, may all beings be well. All beings, above, below, around, and everywhere. Abundant, exalted, immeasurable. And I'll ring the bell in a moment to shift to a talk, but please stay fresh. Keep this sense of aliveness and attention, awareness, and care. And the sense of well-wishing through the whole of the talk, through the whole of the afternoon. And hopefully for the whole rest of our lives. May I be well, and may all beings be well.
I had the pleasure of attending Clear Mountain Saturday morning program yesterday. And something that I really thought was sweet was how the whole community requested the Dhamma talk together. So, if we may, okay. So if you know the formal Dhamma talk request, please feel free to chant along. And if you'd like to follow along, it's on page 124 in our chant book. And we just do the Pali, we just chant the Pali. But then if you have a moment to read the English at some point, it's very sweet. And there's two ways to chant it, so you'll just have to listen to me to see which way we're doing it. Bow. 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 Brahmachaloka dipati sahampati katanjali Santida Sata Parajaka Jatika Dese Tu Dhammang Anukampimang Pajam. Yeah. Yeah.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. It's very good to be here. Ajahn Nisabho and I will take turns. We'll kind of shift past the mic back and forth for the Dhamma reflection. There's a four-word phrase which it's an interesting phrase, and I've encountered it in Thailand and in America and in California and in Washington, and it's a unique phrase. It's not like the media is using this four-word phrase, and I've heard it's almost like family of monastics or family that aren't Buddhists, how they relate to their Buddhist-inspired relative. And be curious if any of you have gotten this sentiment or even heard the exact phrasing, but there was a period of time when my parents, and I think many parents of monastics who are not raised in a Buddhist culture, the family phrases what their son or daughter is doing as, quote, this whole Buddhist thing. This whole Buddhist thing. Has anybody ever heard that? Is this it's ridiculous. It's like they're talking to each other. It's like all our families are figuring these phrases out. And it's unfortunate. I mean, we have religious garb, we, as monastics, we look like we're doing something super religious. We got the haircut and we got the outfit. And it seems like there would be something super mystical about what we're doing. And it's this whole thing. It feels like you're bringing home all your dirty laundry or something and throwing it on your family or something. But I'm amazed at just how universal the Buddha's teachings are, and just the Buddha was just talking about the mind, and the mind that he was pointing to 2,500 years ago in India. You see the exact same patterns in 20th century, 21st century America, and it's just the mind doing the mind's thing. And the Buddha was just a genius at pointing out these different patterns of mind. Last night we talked about the Four Noble Truths, the truth of suffering, the truth of the cause of suffering or unsatisfactoriness, the truth of the cessation or the ending of the cause of suffering, i.e. the ending of suffering, and the path leading to the ending of suffering. And that's a great formulation, a great structure. It's a great blueprint for our lives. And as we mentioned yesterday, we really have to find these maps for ourselves. Little babies in whatever culture, we're not automatically given a blueprint for life, an instruction manual, a map for how to get to a particular goal, because the goals of the world are so variegated and fickle and just unconsidered for the most part. The signs along the highway are encouraging you in one direction, and our own skillful intentions are pointing us one way, and got family saying this and friends saying that, and it's just pulling us in so many different directions. So to have these different frameworks that the Buddha gives us can be really helpful. So last night talking about Four Noble Truths, and today kind of continuing this theme of roots and rooting, like we did in the meditation. And this is another framework which the Buddha gave of 3 unwholesome roots. That's greed, anger, and delusion. And 3 wholesome roots of non-greed, non-anger, non-delusion. Or even their extreme positive equivalent of giving and loving and seeing clearly. So You can imagine in front of you, last night we spent the night at one of our supporters here, and he's got a really beautiful garden in his backyard, and got to walk through it a little bit this morning. But it just, yeah, in your mind's eye, imagine looking out into a garden, and you've got actually 2 garden plots separated by a cobblestone path. And on the right side, you have a very healthy and beautiful garden. It's got, it has beautiful seeds, and it's got beautiful sprouts that are starting to grow up. And it's got a little Buddha statue like they sell in America. It's got a Buddha statue there, and it's got a bird feeder, and it's got a bird bath. And it just looks like a Disney scene, just right out of a 1990s Disney scene. I don't know what Disney scenes are like these days, but friendly, happy birds and squirrels and just a happy garden. And the other side of the cobblestone pathway, this isn't what the garden was like last night, but on the other side, you've just got this nasty old, totally bramble-filled, thorny patch there's tires in it, and you got invasive socks thrown around, molding. And you just look in this other side of the garden, it's that's gross, and you just don't want to have anything to do with it. It looks gross, and it's gross, and it's not healthy. You don't want to eat anything from that second garden, the garden on the left. But we have just right next to us, as we look out over these gardens, there's a 2-pronged hose that's going, and it's got one of these little switches, and we can either switch the hose that has a drip line to the Wholesome, the really healthy, beautiful garden, and we have a drip line going out of this Y junction from the faucet to the kind of scraggly old side of the garden plot. And it's that left side which is the unwholesome roots of greed, anger, and delusion. And that other really beautiful plot, that's the wholesome side of non-greed, non-anger, non-delusion, of giving, of loving, of living, of seeing clearly. And you can look at the Buddha, when the Buddha is talking, he's talking from different angles. He's talking from different angles. So as you're looking at the garden as you are, on the right and the left, you can imagine that the right side, that beautiful garden, is what's underground there, the roots on that side, in the Four Noble Truths framework. That is the path. That's the path that leads to the end of suffering. You water that, you develop the path. And the fruit that grows up in the beautiful Disney garden, that is the end of suffering, the cessation of suffering. That's the fruit on the beautiful garden. And then over on this ugly garden over here, what's underneath the ground, that's the second noble truth. That's the truth of craving. When we turn the spigot to water that garden, we're watering the mind states, the intentions, the attention towards greed, anger, and delusion. When we listen to those thoughts that just compulsively find fault with the people around us. And it's really important to be cognizant of this and be aware of this, because unfortunately the people we find fault with most are oftentimes the people we care about most. It's just the people we see the most often, and we really need to learn how to switch the faucet. It's just such a long habit. It's almost as if even we do a bunch of good, we come to Sunday Silas and we've cranked the water, it's flowing all good to the beautiful garden, but then it's like that switch is just, it's got the momentum, it's got the plastic memory to just scoot back through the rest of the afternoon to this greed, anger, and delusion, and all the gross and subtle ways that we do that and we space out. And so being real conscious about what we're watering, because this is the truth of kama or karma, and that's a Pali or a Sanskrit word, and it might sound foreign, but really it just means action, and it's the actions of body, speech, and mind. The water hose, it's always on, even if it's just a trickle. And we really need to become cognizant of that, because we'll reap the fruit of the roots which we water. So what is the fruit in the ugly garden, the scary garden? That is suffering, the first noble truth. So looking at it this way, we're seeing in terms of the Four Noble Truths, the roots underneath the ground, the second noble truth, the craving, which causes the fruit of suffering. And then over here, we're watering the fruits of the path, developing the path, and leading to the beautiful, tasty, sweet fruits of liberation, freedom from suffering. But walk 10 foot forward, you're in the middle of this path. And when you look right, you're seeing the same garden, but from a different angle. So same garden, but here the Buddha frames things in terms of the roots of non-greed, non-anger, and non-delusion. Same wholesome garden, same unwholesome garden, same scary garden. Turn to your left and you see that scary garden, and you can look in terms of the roots of things. And the Buddha used different languages depending on who he was talked to. Sometimes he would talk about what is the one root of suffering. It's ignorance. Or sometimes he would say in the Four Noble Truths, it's craving. Sometimes he would talk about 3 unwholesome roots. Sometimes he would talk about 4 biases, or 4 bodily knots, or 5 hindrances, or 16 subtle corruptions of mind, or 108 ways that craving fills into our lives and creates this bitter fruit of suffering. And then also on the beautiful side of things, he talks about these roots of the wholesome. And we didn't chant it this morning, but the 5 precepts, that is a fruit. That is a fruit. That's non-suffering that comes from watering. As we chant this, as we give this intention towards beauty in our lives and beauty is in our community, the fruit of that is when we don't kill, but we abstain from killing. We don't steal, but we're actually generous. We don't commit sexual misconduct, but we actually have integrity with all of our relationships, and we don't lie, but our words become more and more valuable when we pay more attention to what we're saying. And that's the beautiful fruit of that other garden. So just paying attention to what we're watering, because we're always watering something, even if whether we're speaking or whether we're listening, whether we're at the monastery or we're at home or we're at the meditation center or we're sitting with our eyes closed or walking with our eyes open. All of it, the water tap is on, and it's going one direction or the other, or it's flipping back and forth, but paying attention to what we're watering.
That image of socks was just right on the mark.
Oh yeah.
With every new hindrance you named, or the 108, I just thought of more and more socks. And I actually, I didn't get to take a walk through the garden yesterday, but I did get to sleep underneath a Christmas tree in Charles' house, or a pagan tree, as he put it. And for me, that's one of the epitomes of the wholesome root. I missed the Christmas magic there. So the reflection Ajahn Kovilo offered around the fact that we're always watering something. There's this narrative in Western Dhamma circles often about pure or bare awareness. And it's true that we can bring an equanimous awareness and attention to experience. Sometimes it's enough to have the citta calm and reflective and illuminated by wisdom, and to see and just watch the hindrances and the kind of socks and various things moving through the mind, and see, just through seeing them, watch them settle down and fade. Ajahn Jayasaro gives the analogy of sometimes the mischievous mind is like a bunch of children underneath a kind of hidden room underneath a staircase, and all the mind has to do, the adult has to do, is open up the room and turn on the light and just say, carry on. And it's not fun anymore, and the mind just settles down. So there is a place for just using wisdom to let the mind settle. Another teacher compared it to shaking a bottle of water filled with debris. And during our daily life, there's this constant shaking, but place it on the table and the debris settles out and the mind is left clear. And this is the importance of having those 20 minutes of meditation in the morning, 45 minutes, something.
But the Buddha didn't talk about bare awareness. He talked about skillful and unskillful awareness. And this idea that that water tap is always running. I think some people may have had this experience of a hose being on and you just trying to find some place to point it, and it's always spraying somewhere. And to understand that in the Buddhist conception, every moment is a choice. The old karma that comes up are the results of old karma, the fruits of both of those gardens. Those are the echoes of previous actions, the memories of the day, the regrets, the echoes of patterns of planning. Those we have little control over. You can compare a lot of what happens in your mind. We take so much ownership over those thoughts, but you don't know what you're going to think in the next few seconds. It's not even your own radio that you're listening to. It's sort of a neighbor's radio. And where the karma of mind comes in, intention, where we create new karma, is that moment of buying into and feeding off of and feeding those patterns. So when the echo of anger comes up, do you buy into the argument? Do you revel and become drunk on or intoxicated by or colored by that flush of annoyance or anger or aversion? One of the terms the Buddha used for that sense of delight and lust is raga, and it's cognate with the word rouge, red, and reddening. So this is where karma is created, when the old sort of narrative of depression arises again, of self-recrimination, of greed. Do you watch that movie again? Or do you restrain the mind and the heart from jumping into something? And sometimes that's as simple as just asking yourself, would I pay $5 to watch this movie again? Sometimes it's imagining the damage down the road from giving into this. Sometimes it's recollecting how little time we have left and what a blessing to be exposed to these teachings, and asking, do we really want to feed these things again? Is that the garden we really want to water? But this understanding that the sickness of a dilution of purpose that is so endemic in the modern world today, the great tragedy of modern society, is so rarely or so often not a enormous break with normalcy. It's rather an intoxication and loss of ourselves in normalcy, a dilution of purpose in that confluence of comfort and convenience. And it's a subtle tragedy, and it's one that is insidious and creeping. But we all begin to feel it. As you begin to practice, that metric of good and evil becomes much less relevant. Most of us don't do that much evil. But the relevant language of beautiful and unbeautiful, or of trivial and non-trivial, become viscerally important. Are you wasting your life? And not in the sense of someone, most of us are living good, beautiful lives. But, I remember I went to Reed College here in Portland State as well. And it was I had a good life there. I volunteered at Open Meadow up in Northeast. But there was always this sense of the compass needle just being a little bit off, and that slight sense of nausea, and the need to kind of fracture yourself into these streams of greed, of various more modes of distraction, for lack of a river bed, a stream bed deep enough to truly be worthy of and hold our whole hearts. And then you come into contact with the Dhamma, and for the first time, maybe you really understand this is worthy of your life. And just the sense of this is non-trivial. And the sensitivity that develops over time, where after a year of practice or 2 years, the career or the relationship or the activity, the occupation. There's not a sense of it being wrong, but just a sense of I don't have time for this anymore. And to know that that's part of the path, to pay attention to that needle, that still small voice, and not to rush into any giant decisions, but to understand there is something real speaking there. And that same voice, that same thin thread of Dhamma runs through every moment, in every action of what we give our attention to, where sometimes that hose is a fire hose, and other times it's just a steady drip line. And so understanding that the power of the Buddhist path is not often in the seductive and entrancing decisions that it invites us to sometimes make with our lives. So many of us, this is obvious for me, but have had there's a part of most people's hearts which says, of a lot of people's hearts, which intuits a power of say, the monastic form, and says, maybe someday, if conditions came together, I wonder. And that's such an important North Star to have. There's an archetypal quality to that orientation of just the symbol of renunciation. And just holding that in tandem with all these other lighthouses in our lives of duty, of purpose, of what our lives are. And that is how we guide our route through samsara in line with Dhamma. And that doesn't have to lead to any radical changes in one's life. But that the beauty of Dhamma is that using this overlay of this concept that intention and this orientation towards awakening manifests in every moment, through attention, through non-attention, through what we're feeding in our minds, through which roots we're watering, that the most mundane, simple, routine existence becomes the fertilest ground for profound transformation. And in fact, we need some regularity for that to be the fact. The heart can only take so much entropy. Monasteries are some of the most boring places you can imagine, for a reason. So to understand that as that alchemy in the heart begins to move, that it's okay to have that regularity. It's okay if, there's a teacher who said, you're perfect just as you are, and there's some room for improvement. So, seeing our lives where they're at, understanding this overlay of intention infuses, again, modern middle-class life or non-middle-class life with a canopy of meaning, which for many of us has been ripped to shreds and which we only have found again through these Four Noble Truths, through this teaching that's readily accessible and palatable for the modern mind and heart. But that even as we infuse our lives with that, we can orient in more explicit ways towards what's meaningful, and that metric of beautiful, unbeautiful, trivial, non-trivial, become our guideposts on that journey towards which side of that garden we're pointing ourselves to. Ajahn.
It's impressive, Ajahn, that your compass needle when you were in college was only a little bit off. It's impressive.
It's pretty off.
Yeah. Mine was like totally off. I was like, it's like a needle jumped the little stand and it was just floating in the water there, pointing every which way. Having these structures, having the Buddha point these things out, as you said at the beginning, there's not much Buddhist about these psychological principles. You can see them in somebody of any religion or no religion or any continent really, and they're just truths of the mind. But to have them, if someone has a really keen social intelligence or emotional intelligence, then you can figure these things out for yourself just by looking around. But I am really grateful that the Buddha just made these things so explicit so I can incline my life in one direction and not in the other. And these roots, which we're watering, whichever side of it's on, the plant is growing. As you said, the tap is always going, and the plants on either side are continuing to grow, and they shape our lives. They shape our interactions, they shape our relationships, they shape our family dynamics. They even shape our physical body to some degree. I remember, I'm 42 now. I think when I was like in my mid-30s, Ajahn Kovilo quoted somebody like T.S. Eliot as saying, when you turn 40, you get the face that you deserve. I didn't know what to think. And I still don't know what to think. And I asked him about that, I think, after I turned 40, and he says, you don't always have to believe T.S. Eliot, but but it is true. I mean, we're instantiating our intentions. Our intentions are becoming alive, becoming real, concretizing in our physical bodies. And yeah, you can see it. Someone living in Thailand, I think all three of us have lived in Thailand for at least 6 years each. But yeah, I mean, living in a Buddhist culture, you really see a lot of beauty. You see people who are in their 80s and 90s coming in and out meditating, all the monks, on a regular basis, and just extremely bright people. And you get a very different idea about what beauty is, what physical beauty is, when you see someone's face shine, and shine from the inside in a way which, I mean, yeah, you can't always know what's behind a face, or what causes and conditions made our bodies come into be the way they are. But there are tendencies, and a mind of friendliness, a mind of metta. If we've been watering this root of non-ill will, ill will does mutate the face. It does scar the face. These roots shape our whole personalities. Buddhaghosa, in the Path of Purification, talks about personality types, a personality type of greed, the greed type, the anger type, the deluded type. And then he describes how these different beings walk and sleep and sweep and eat, and how they're just living in the world. And there's a lot of funny phrases in there, but one of them is that anger types, hate types, when they go to bed, they throw their bodies on the bed and they sleep with a scowl. And if you're spending 8 hours a day with a scowly face, and then not to mention when you're awake and continuing that, over time, you're going to be all scowly faced. And these it's not just this life, and you can believe whatever you want. No one can force a belief on anybody else or on yourself. But the Buddha did talk about future lives, about other realms, and keep watering hatred all of this life. And it's not too hard to imagine, and you can even see it in some pockets of the world or pockets of history. The fruit of a tree of hatred well watered is a hellish existence of schadenfreude, enjoying the pain of others, and all the suffering and fire incumbent with that. Keep watering all the roots of greed, and that leads to a realm of maybe even a hungry ghost realm, just a belly which is huge and a mouth which is just so small. You just have this enormous appetite, but you can never fill your stomach. That's from watering all the greedy roots. And then just delusion, it's an animalistic, in America, we got some great, our pets, they're cute, they got a great existence. And my dad doesn't believe in rebirth. So when I asked him, so what do you want to be reborn as? He's always like, I want to be a turtle. I want to be a turtle in the sea. And or people might think, I want to be born as a dog. And they get they just get to hang out all day, and people rub your belly and whatnot. And that's great if you can be reborn as a dog in America, or, but don't be reborn in a dog there's a lot of places where it's not really so great to be reborn as a dog. And that's what our deluded inclinations, you can feel it in your own self. But on the positive end of thing, if you cultivate a generous heart, a heart of non-greed, generosity, non-hatred, loving kindness, non-delusion, that's the fruit of that is heavenly. You live a blessed existence, and you more and more incline, when you yourself are living in a really beautiful way, it's like you bring beauty into your life. Beautiful people want to associate with you. Beautiful beings come to you. That, yeah, it's a blessing which just gives more blessings. So we see the results, the fruits of these different roots in different time scales, and paying attention to that, and what kind of fruit do we want to be consuming and giving to the world, because we're not the only ones who have to eat our fruit. So,
I love that T.S. Eliot quote. I'm 36, so I have 4 years to
get your face in order.
The pet reflection's quite good. There's a Buddhist joke that dogs are set to be reborn as humans next life, so they're pretty excited about it, and cats have just been reborn as humans, so they're like, been there, done that, not interested. But in all seriousness, a Thai Ajahn did say, one who's generous but doesn't keep sila will be reborn as a dog in a household. So keep your sila, people. Because we live with some chihuahuas, and it doesn't look, I mean,
They're cute.
they are cute. They're just very anxious.
Yeah.
And the personality types are, although it's worth not becoming too attached to them, they are really useful for knowing a bit about yourself. And the descriptions are hilarious. Ajahn Kovilo yesterday was quoting some of the Visuddhimagga, the path of purification, talking about how each walks, and the anger type kind of digs their heels in, and the greed type kind of prances or sets their feet down very carefully and beautifully, and the delusion type kind of flops around. And one interesting thing is that each type matures, or should mature, into a wholesome equivalent. So greed, you want to channel that if you're a greed type. And you can tell what do you notice when you walk into a room. Do you notice what you like? Do you notice what you dislike? Or do you just feel a little confused? And it's probably a mix of all three to some extent. But greed matures into faith. Greed matures into faith. And to lean into that, to channel that, you can't stop the hose, but often you really can turn the heart inclining towards something and wanting to imbibe, but just turn it towards the triple gem. Greed or anger, aversion, which sees the fault, that precision is the exact ingredient in wholesome wisdom. So aversion matures into wisdom. And Long Prapanyavado says that almost all comedians are aversive types. So they see the faults and they're pointing it out. And delusion matures into rooted equanimity. And when you're working with these roots, it can sound so focusing on the negative, okay, we have the unwholesome roots, and the wholesome roots are just the lack of those, and yet, for me, it's a very hopeful message, because the Buddha does point to the roots of lobha, dosa, moha, greed, anger, delusion. But when he says their opposites are lack of greed, non-hatred, non-delusion, what he's almost pointing to is that the nature of the citta, its inmost resonance, is closer to those qualities of love, of clarity, such that when you let go of that extra adjective of hatred, or, well, it's not an adjective in that case, but, of the mind that is imbued with hatred or imbued with delusion, what you're left with is a clarity and a goodwill and a benevolence. And that's a very hopeful message, that the heart, in its most intimate resonance, the enlightened mind, is loving and clear and spacious. Ajahn Sucitto talks about the citta as a pond and these waves on it, but when it calms, that clarity is the reflective surface of wisdom. The mind calm sees clearly. But to cultivate explicitly, so often it's enough to restrain at first those inclinations And this is, I think, especially true with aversion. In terms of the drip line, which so many of us see feeding those roots constantly, I'd say aversion can be a constant, one of the most consistent. Ajahn, of the three forms of right intention in the Noble Eightfold Path, the intention towards renunciation, towards non-ill will, towards non-cruelty, two of the three have to do with giving up aversion. And I don't think that's an accident. I think Ajahn Brahmali says that the key function of mindfulness for many of us should be maintaining our ethics, our virtue, and not dwelling in ill will. And so to keep a really strong eye out for that tendency of the mind to lean towards just a low hum of aversion throughout the day, and to take that very seriously. And you'll need a tool belt to deal with it, because a means will work for a while and then not work. And so being on the lookout right when you wake up, bring the mind very carefully to loving kindness. Let the self crystallize around the intention of goodwill right when you wake up, because the mind will go automatically to crystallize around what it finds most easy to grab hold of. And often that's planning or craving or the argument. And you know the argument. And just to understand that sometimes it's enough just to label anger. Sometimes you just have to undercut it by pointing to the unpleasant Vedana underlying the anger. Just say, oh, this is unpleasant feeling. In the Abhidhamma, there's 4 universal unwholesome mind states that accompany or unwholesome mental factors that accompany every unwholesome mind state. Non-conscientiousness, non-concern, ahiri, anottapa, restlessness, and ignorance. And that means that if you undercut any of those 4, the whole state dissolves. And restlessness is a key one. So can you just feel the tension in the body around anger or greed, just how it clenches up? And if you can settle that, if you can breathe through that, if you can ground into the feet, then the whole state can dissolve. Sometimes you have to just bring to mind sometimes you might just be like, okay, I'm labeling it, I'm working with it. But you find that the kind of glowing ember of that anger is just remaining. And to not become complacent, but then really, maybe you need to very explicitly turn your mind to the good qualities of the person that you're aversive to. And just all these means of making sure that that root is not being watered. And with non-aversion, sometimes really it's enough to restrain, or that's a big part of it. With non-greed, I think a big part is generosity. And for me, that is the most powerful route through greed. It's hard to destroy the valence on an object, but transferring that valence from wanting it for yourself to wanting it for another is much easier. So when you find the item on Amazon you really want, you can still press buy, but just change the address to a friend's. And this is a key principle in Buddhist monastic circles, is whatever one gains through righteously gained, one does not partake without first having shared with their spiritual companions. And so when Ajahn Kovilo and I get a really good something, we're always like, all right, we think it's delightful to, yeah.
You're good at sharing.
Thank you. He is too. And I lived with one monk who was so good at it once. He'd even assume it about me. Once I think I ate too much of some chocolate we had, and he said, Nisabho, I know I had this weakness for this chocolate, and I know you saw that it was in there and you knew it would be a problem for me. You took care of it for me, and I'm so grateful. And I was like, yeah. But just really rejoicing in that, giving. And the Buddha said one of the objects of respect was receiving guests and hospitality. And just that is such a key way of getting rid of the root of greed. A little more and then Budisaro? Or?
Maybe open it up to questions?
Yeah, and maybe 3 minutes with Budisaro?
Sure.
Yeah. Budisaro, would you like to speak on the roots at all? And let's give you a
May I may I invite all of us to take a moment to, in our garden, to water a sense of gratitude for the Dhamma that has been shared this morning. Take a moment to feel within our heart and appreciate anything that's really touched us this morning. It's so easy to just be rushing by everything. But let us well water, well soak, well process and digest and nourish gratitude. Appreciation. And also, even coming today, taking the precepts, coming to a Dhamma session, gathering, let us take a moment and appreciate the wholesomeness of that intention, of that action, and let it soak in and really feel it in your heart. The wholesomeness that you wish for in this life. And that you are acting upon by coming here today to listen to the Dhamma, to take the precepts, and to align ourselves to the path leading ultimately to liberation. Can you feel in your heart that wish? And let us appreciate that, be grateful for that. Let us nourish it. And I would also like to take this opportunity for myself. 11 years ago, I came to Portland Friends of the Dhamma when I was 17. This building had just been bought. And sincerely and deeply from my heart, so grateful for this community's support. This community helped to keep alive and aligned to my intention to ordain. I'd stayed in Portland for another year before I left to India, and then subsequently Thailand to ordain. In this community of Portland Friends of the Dhamma, again kept alive and kept me aligned to this path when many other directions or influences could have taken me somewhere else. And I have been blessed and very fortunate in this life to have ordained as a monk, to have found my brothers and friends on this path, to find my teacher and guide. So sincerely grateful for this community, and just thank you so much.
Sadhu Karanga Dhamase, Sadhu, 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 Anumodami.
Okay, so I think we might have time for one or two questions before the baby blessing, which we'll maybe do just a little bit past 11:30 for those who can stay. But if anybody has any questions here in person, or if you have any questions online, you can raise your hand there too.
I don't have a question, just a comment to say that I so appreciate the analogy to just the drip line, and that we're always watering something every single moment. And this morning, at this point, that really, really resonated and was so useful. So thank you so, so much. That's really helpful.
Thank you. Your Dharma talk could not help but find my own experience. I hope this is useful to others. There is some duality that I'm experiencing or worry, or I feel some sort of like, and it's really useful. Like I hear the drip line is where we put our attention, right? What we feed. And I kept wanting to be in the side of the path of sort of fruitful disregard, watering or tending to or pulling up all the dirty socks from the other side, you know, and letting the roots of that reach in and, you know, again, it's a metaphor, right? Metaphors simplify in order to give us clarity. And I guess I'd want, if there's something, if anyone else is experiencing this, or if you have any illumination to maybe help me be more clear, more relaxed in this process that I've moved or moving or believe I'm moving into, or who am I anyway, right? And only language is limited. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. There's a Tibetan teaching that for what can be medicine for a non-dual practitioner might be poison for a dualistic practitioner, and what might be medicine for a non-dual practitioner might be poison for a non-dual practitioner. And yeah, it's good to have the to find like a psychological flexibility to relate to both, because both can be true. And yeah, on the level of ethics, it can be really helpful to have clear lines. But on the level of mind, specifically that third satipatthana, the third foundation of mindfulness, mind knowing mind, in and of itself, ardent, alert, and mindful, putting aside greed and distress with reference to the world. That which knows an angry mind is an angry mind and doesn't make a problem out of it. That which knows a hateful mind is a hateful mind and doesn't make a problem out of it. That's the same garden, but from like an aerial view. And it's not even just like a Google Earth aerial view. It's a global view. I mean, the beauty of a non-dual approach is that, yeah, you're looking, the distinctions between internal and external, between this and that, they become quite different. It's like an omnidirectional awareness that you can tap into. But it's good to note the Theravada teachings in the Pali Canon, in vast majority of cases, really are speaking to a dualistic point of view. And I think it can be really helpful in certain ways. But yeah, it can also feel like poison when you're trying to step out, or when you can't. Like, it seems like the drip is stuck on in the direction of greed, anger, and delusion. And I can't actually, it's just stuck. I've got a screwdriver in it and I'm trying to turn it, and just being able, there comes a point when I just have to accept this. In that level of metacognition, you're stepping up into this 3D Google Earth view of the garden. And yeah, okay, knowing a mind of greed is a mind of greed. And then, yeah, when the rubber meets the road, being also able to make distinctions and make decisions, because decision making is, on one level, it's a dualistic thing. But there is this unwholesome and unwholesome, wholesome and unwholesome. And then there is that which is beyond wholesome and unwholesome. Yeah. So in a true non-dual perspective, it's not much of an answer, but.
No, that's a really relevant way. There's also, just echoing what Ajahn Kovilo said, there's a Majjhima Nikaya 2, the Sabbasava Sutta, all the defilements. So Majjhima Nikaya 2 gives a list of ways of dealing with defiled mind states. And the first one is through seeing. And like later on, there's replacing, avoiding, enduring, crushing. These all come, but the first and foremost is just to see it. And I really think that's put first for a reason, because you're right, often it's just enough to look at it with clarity. And it's also the importance of that distinction between old and new karma, because you do want to see old karma, old patterns come up and be able to hold them with care. You know, these are echoes of survival mechanisms we've had from the past. These are old habits, just to tie ourselves into knots on every single one, and to constantly be, kind of intensely steering every single moment. This whole practice is one of learning right effort, and that's a gentle, joyful effort often. So that acknowledging, like, yes, we see old karma come up, we hold it with care, but also that distinction between seeing when we're leaping into that next phase of making new karma and buying into the fantasy and running with the defilement, and that just takes some wisdom to parse out. But you point to something really important, because the Buddha did compare his teaching to a poisonous snake. And like Ajahn Kovilo was saying, if these are held wrong, they really can be intense. And the poisonous snake analogy, in the sense of if we grab it wrong, it can bite us. And with moderns who are so self-recriminating and already tie ourselves into knots, these teachings that really point to effort are just so often picked up wrong. So thank you for pointing back to that spaciousness at the root of it all. That's really important. So thank you.
Just to briefly add, these things that are like unwholesome garden, like deep inside of us, there's like a very sensitive dimension, and as we more intimate and attune with our conscience, with our hearts, these things like anger and these things that we get caught up with, the defilements, we can start to better sense, better feel the harm that it's causing to us, like deep, deep inside, or even the harm that it's causing to others deep, deep inside. It's like a very natural response when, like for our hearts, for our conscience, that we don't want to harm ourselves. We don't want to harm others. Like this very innocent place in our being, deep, deep inside. So it's also, and it's very similar to like the body as it becomes more healthy, as it like experiences viruses. The body's, it's just the nature of one who's becoming more healthy that it wishes to repel it, to rid itself of it. So there's also this like natural element to the purification process as we become more and more healthy and deepen in it.
Well, it's 11:30, so that's usually when these Sunday morning silas wrap up. We will be continuing with a baby blessing, and what could be more fun than a baby blessing? So,
No, what were you going to say? Okay, yeah, so we'll be doing that. I'm sorry we don't have more time for Q&A, but we will be going downstairs after the baby blessing, and people can have a chance to talk and all that. Additionally, Wednesdays we have a Zoom session with Clear Mountain. If anyone ever wants to join, just love to see faces there, and we always have a chance for more discussion. And you can always message us on the chat, and we can stay on after and say hello as well. We really want to cultivate this community between Portland and Seattle. But I think before the blessing, we'll just all pay respects to the Buddha for those who want, and then do the blessing. And just to really thank Budhisaro for coming. It was, we didn't even know he was here until like a week, 2 weeks ago or something. So we're very grateful, and just such elegant reflections, really. So thanks for steering him towards the robes, people.
can bow together, do the closing homage in English on page 29. The Lord, the perfectly enlightened and blessed one, I render homage to the Buddha, the blessed one. The teaching so completely explained by him, I bow to the Dhamma. The Blessed One's disciples who have practiced well, I bow to the Sangha. You can bow 3 times to our teachers if you'd like. Bow.
I'm Audrey, and this is my husband Drew, and this is our first child, Augustine. We would like to request a blessing from him.
You've never done a baby blessing before.
We have one of those huge water whippers.
I got a little tiny one.
No, we're not doing baptism.
Well, maybe we can invite because we're only here for the day and hopefully come back again regularly, but the whole community here is here as much as you all can come. So it would be nice if we could all chant together, if that would work for you all. Maybe we can start with the Namo, the Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Sama Sambuddhassa. We can do that all together 3 times. And then we can chant the Buddha's words on loving kindness. And we can do it in a sweet and kind of lullaby-esque version. We'll actually start with the invitation to the devas, so inviting all goodness and light to come into the space with us here. Samanta Chakravarnesu Atra Gachantu Devata Sadamma Munirajasa Sunantu Sagumogaram Sage Kame Charupe Girisikaratade Jantalike Vimane Vipeirate Jakame Taruanagahame Kehavatu Brahma Jayantu Deva Chalatala Visume Yakaganta Balaga Titanta Santikaya Munivara Vachanam Sarone Sunandu Dhamma Savana Karoham Padanda Dhamma Savana Karoham Padanda Dhamma Savana Karo Ayam Padanda. All together. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Page 37. This is what should be done by one who is skilled in goodness and who knows the path of peace. Let them be able and upright, straightforward and gentle in speech, humble and not conceited, contented and easily satisfied, unburdened with duties, and frugal in their ways, peaceful and calm and wise and skillful, not proud and demanding in nature. Let them not do the slightest thing that the wise would later reprove, wishing in gladness and in safety. May all beings be at ease, whatever living beings there may be, whether they are weak or strong, omitting none, the great or the mighty, medium, short or small, the seen and the unseen, those living near and far away.
May all beings be at ease. Let none deceive another, nor despise any being in any state. Let none with anger or ill will wish harm upon another, even as a mother protects with her life her child, her only child. So with a boundless heart should one cherish all living beings, radiating kindness over the entire world, spreading upwards to the skies and downwards to the depths, outwards and unbounded, free from hatred and ill will, whether standing or walking, seated or lying down, free from drowsiness. One should sustain this recollection. This is said to be the sublime abiding, by not holding to fixed views. The pure-hearted one, having clarity of vision, being free from all sense desires, is not born again into this world.
We've all been chanting over this rose in the water, and just the three of us will do this chant of victory, just wishing for both of you and for your new one, just all the victory and joy in life. And we'll, as we chant, we'll each sprinkle him a little bit. And then if you were up for it, you all could face that way, and people could actually form a line, and until he starts crying. You will, in addition, do quick flicks to yourself and hands.
Or maybe even touching it up to his head when, because if each person's flicking water at his head, gentle touch to the head.
And we'll continue doing the victory chant until the end.
Jayanto Bodhiha Mule Sakyanam Nandiwadano Ewan Dawam Vichayo O Vijaya Sujaya Mandale Aparajita Palange Sise Patavi Bogare Abhise Kesa Babuddha Nagaga Pato Amodati Sunakatang Sumangalang Subhabatang Surutitang Sukano Sumuhutto Jasuyita Brahmachari Subhadakina Kaya Kamam Vasha Kamam.
Go for it. This is your chance.
Brahmachari Subhadakina Kaya Kama Vacha Kama Padakinam Padakinam Mano Kamam Panidite Padakina Padakina Nikatwana Labantade Padakine Chayanto Bodhiya Bole Sakyanam Nandiwadano kesa babudana agapato pamodati sunakata sumangalam supapadam subuddhitam sukano sumuto jasuita brahmachari supadakina kaya kammam vacha kammam padakinam mano kammam paridite padakina nikatava nalabantate padakine chayanto bodhiyamule sakyanam nandivanano evam devam vijayo vijaya sujaya mangaleya parachita palanke sise patavipokare abhiseke sababudana akapato pamodati sunakata sumangalam supapadam suhodita sukano sumuto jasuita brahmachari supadakina kaya kammam vacha kammam padakinam mano kammam paridite padakina nikatva nalabandate padakine jayantyo sabamangala rakantu sabadevata sababhutan bhavena saraswati bhavantu devavatu sabamangala rakantu sabadevata sabadhammanubhavena saraswati bhavantu devavatu sabamangala rakantu sabadevata sabasanganu bhavena saraswati bhavantu devavatu. Maybe as we're having the last few people touch the rose, if we can just open up the space for anyone to say anything as a blessing or as a wish for Audrey, Augustine, and Drew. Just open up some space for that.
You always feel free to call upon the Sangha and the Upasakas in any way, at any time, for any support that you may need.
May Augustine have a life filled with many kalyanamrita.
Samsara, it's so rare to come across the Dhamma, and the fact that Augustine has two parents who already
Are in contact with it and has been brought so clearly and immediately into its kind of scope is such a blessing, and may Augustine benefit many and find refuge in the Triple Gem. Sadhu, sadhu, anumodami.
All right, we can offer 3 vows here now. Thank you to Audrey and Drew and Augustine and monks and everyone. Yeah. Yeah.
Audrey, Drew, would you like to say anything as well? Just at the end.
I know many of you already know this, but the labor with Augustine lasted 48 hours, and I did it unmedicated. My pain management was the 3 refuges. It was the Natmo Tassa, and I could not have undergone that experience and benefited from it without this community introducing me to it. So I'm very grateful for all of our teachers, lay and monastic, and I look so forward to showing Augustine everything I love about this path and the people who walk it with me. Thank you.
Thank you both so much. And I think now we can go downstairs and Augustine could have his first coffee. I've never raised a baby myself, so don't have to listen. Yeah.